रिकॉर्ड तो तुम लोग बहुत पहले से कर रहे हो ना?
Thank God. Sing some nonsense.
Anyway, yeah, bro. Welcome back to those cars.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, बहुत कुछ बदल गया है since the last time we met officially on camera. वैसे उसके बाद तो we've met because of art, friendship, etc. multiple times. But you've become an influencer now. How's
Is
that?
it?
Like,
Do you think so?
yeah, you've got like followers in the K's on Instagram. People are
Yeah,
मतलब
the
because of
K is
you,
a big
you know?
letter, even for
It's a
Ekta
mental
Kapoor.
switch. It's like, how आप millionaire से billionaire में सिर्फ कुछ एक zero का फर्क होता है और दो zeros का फर्क होता है. It's like that. But your life must have changed, right? इससे पहले you were sort of doing things under the radar, among friends, and now there's an audience who watches you, which is also one of the best ways to make your guest more nervous.
I don't think my life has changed. My life is exactly the same. My life is exactly the same. But I do appreciate my audience for expression. You know what I mean? Like, I really do appreciate that now. I spent a lot of time studying, and now if I can share, there's someone to listen. So I'm really happy about that.
उससे पहले, like, you would just share it among your friends and peers, and now when you share something,
No, I
it's like
think
dropping
even
something
on
in the
my
ether.
Instagram, I would share quite a bit. Like I'm just generally a very open person. Yeah. So I would share quite a bit. And yes, amongst my friends, amongst my family, whoever would listen, yeah.
Awesome. I want to ask you straight up, क्योंकि I want to waste no time about this. Abhi, recently you posted this very haunting picture of this avatar of Kali called Chamunda. And I remember Chamunda from Jajantram Mamantram, जिससे Gulliver's Travels की जो उन्होंने वो बनाई थी parody picture.
Jajantram Mantram, yes.
Javed Jaffrey
Yes.
and that.
What a good Javed Jaffrey. He's the ultimate.
Yeah, he
Takeshi's
is awesome.
Castle. Yeah.
उसकी जो commentary है ना, his
Yeah.
commentary in that
Is the best. He's the best compare, as you call it.
he's the best compare because और वो उस टाइम पे उसने कमेंट्री करी है जब वो कैंसिल नहीं हो सकता था. I swear he says एक बार वो वाला गेम नहीं होता हनी कॉम मेज वाला where you have this on top camera और लोग दरवाजे एंटर करते हैं एक दोनों रूम्स में वो होते हैं चंगू मंगू जो तो आपको कीचड़ लगाते हैं और आसपास पानी होता है. Remember that game?
Takeshi's Castle, right?
Takeshi's Castle.
Yeah.
There's multiple games. Right? Skipping Stones, you remember?
Yeah.
पत्थरों पे जाते हैं.
Yeah.
एक maze होती है. There's a maze that you see from the top.
Oh, yeah.
And they're trying to figure out.
And you have to go, yeah.
So in that game, this woman comes and she's kind of plump. She's like, और ये आ गई हैं घर वाले खाते पीते घर की आंटी. मैं बोल रहा हूँ जावेद जाफरी कैसे? How do you get away with this stuff? But it was back in the day and he was OG. But anyway.
He was so funny.
Come back to Chamunda. So that's how I knew about Chamunda. Then I saw your picture and this avatar of Kali sort of looked menacing. ऐसा मतलब you've seen Kali and she looks pretty menacing anyway. But this was almost like ghost, devil-like, for the lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Who is this avatar?
Odisha had something very special going on in the early medieval period, leading up to the late medieval period, late ancient to the mid-medieval period. And this Chamunda that you saw was from Odisha, from this place called Jajpur. Jajpur had something very fascinating going on about Buddhism, about Vajrayana Buddhism. There were universities being set up there. And the worship of the mother goddess or the female form or the Shakta worship was going on in a great, great way.
And when was this happening? At what period
This,
of time?
I think, easily it was happening between the 7th, 8th, 9th century CE up till about, 12th, 13th, some parts of it. It continues up till today, to be very honest. But during that time, there was some sort of a renaissance that was happening over there, And these absolutely evocative sculptures were coming out from Orissa, Bengal, Orissa. These places were very female worshipy. And this particular image of Chamunda, I absolutely love it. It's in the Museum of Jajpur and I really wish to go there. I went really close to there, but somehow I didn't have time to go there. This goddess and the pantheon that she comes from, what she represents, can be either very scary, but in the same time, because she's scary, can be very nurturing to you. So yeah, I'm glad you appreciated it. By the way,
No, it was. कई बार ऐसा होता ना. Some like you can read depictions of fiery monsters and scary goddesses, but it's one thing when the image also justifies the description.
But have you ever thought about it? It's like, okay, we have a goddess, right? And we have a description of her. And then some sculptor is sculpting her out, like Ardhanarishwara, half Shiva, half Parvati, half man, half woman, you know? It's a very interesting piece of sculpture. But when it comes from different parts of the country, the way they sculpt, they follow the same prescriptions, but some places it just comes out stronger. Have you ever wondered when you go and watch those sculptures that have been so carefully crafted, you almost feel a deeper sense of devotion?
100%.
Yeah. I felt that in Orissa because, like, Orissa also has a lot of these interesting stories. The other day, there is this very famous conspiracy theory for the Konark temple that it used to have probably a magnet on top of it and then a sculpture sort of levitating on top of it. And then the magnet also, during the time that the ships used to ply around that coastal area, it used to completely put the rudder off of these ships. And then these ships, because they could see land nearby through whatever tricks you do on a ship when you can't actually see land, you know, like you see a bird or, you know, something
Right.
like that. There are many tricks on the ship. They used to come towards Orissa. So it was like it's a conspiracy theory. I've
But that's-
actually asked several people about this.
It's like, how do you attract trade? Have a big magnet.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, Orissa had a very special thing going on in terms of artistic renaissance. And this sculpture of Chamunda has captured my attention for a very, very long time.
So Kali is a form of, if I'm not wrong, Lakshmi. Is that an accurate assessment?
Lakshmi can be a form of Kali. Kali can be a form of
So
Lakshmi.
who's the main sort of goddess from which all of these separate like demi goddesses and goddesses emerge from? Just say up Kali and then Kali must have other forms like Chamunda is
You know,
one.
I worry to answer this question sometimes, but I will answer it like this. I don't think I've read enough books
Okay.
to answer that accurately.
Okay.
But I would say that as religion developed in our country, every religion also evolved and built its sects as a response to what was happening around it.
Sure.
And suddenly sprung this stream of Shakta worship, where it was the mother goddess, it was the female form, it was the form that came from the earth rather than the sky. It was the form that essentially was far more raw in its energy.
Talk to me more about this idea of sky worshipping versus earth worshipping.
I don't know enough about it, but of what references I've seen in scripture is that the devas essentially come from the sky, and a lot of these Shakta goddesses are goddesses of the earth, like yoginis, for example. You know, they are associated with reproduction. They are associated with procreation. They are associated with sort of fractal energy that essentially emerges from the earth, whereas the extremely celestial energy is more male-like. you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So Chamunda is one, and then you also made a parallel to Bhairava. Just aapko, it's like you know Shiv, just like you know Kali, but then there are other macabre forms. That's the word that you used to understand that. Is there parallels between the two?
yes, essentially, I think in all religions, objectively speaking, you look at certain conservative versions of that religion, and then you see a little bit more macabre or esoteric or more dramatic versions of that religion, and just everything has a spectrum. And as intellectual thought, a philosophical thought, thought on culture, artistic expression emerges, I feel like more dramatic versions are allowed to, exist.
Taking a separate tangent, तो मैं research कर रहा था कि इंडिया के अंदर ऐसा क्या है? What is it about India, more specifically, a form of Indian art and architecture, not paintings exactly, but just sculptures होते हैं, that sort of stuff that you generally deal in. How does it make its way across the world? And the first kind of piece I found when I was stitching this together was the Chola dynasty, right? So could you help हमारे दर्शकों को समझाने के लिए, what is the Chola dynasty roughly? And I know they have a big imprint, but how far does this imprint go?
Uh, well, obviously, in popular culture, the Chola dynasty has taken center stage with fantastic movies being made about them. And why not? Um, I think in the South, there were several empires and artistic expression forms that existed. And Cholas were really at the pinnacle of things at that particular point in time. They had taken scripture and really gone a little abstract with it, right? Now you had the Cholas, then you had the Pallavas, you had the Cheras, you had the yeah, and then you had certain styles of sculpture and expression as well. In terms of the Cholas, um, I don't know so much about the historic element of it. In terms of the art, it is essentially the most expensive art that is sold in any auction house, essentially, right now.
Across the world.
Yeah, because I think South Asian art auctions happen in very few auction houses around the world. A Christie's or a Sotheby's, a Bonhams, a Phillips will probably come up with a South Asian or a Southeast Asian art collection, and it is indeed the Chola bronzes that will fetch the highest price whatsoever, you know.
Hmm.
And it is essentially a wonderful Tribhanga posed Parvati.
What's the
That
Tribhanga pose?
Tribhanga is something that has three angles, you
Okay.
know. It's like, you know, the lady that has her hand on her waist and the other hand lazily hanging down, and she's just about angled at the hip, you
Okay.
know, and she has a fairly, like, Indian body is fairly a very voluptuous, full-blooded ladies live in India, and the depiction of these women, you know, really defies our modern conception of modesty. Really,
Yeah.
have you ever noticed that in terms of sculptures across temples all around India?
I
These
haven't.
women are not modest.
The only temples I've gone to, I've been in and around Faridabad, and they've sort of been built in the last 50, 60 years. So I haven't really.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of temples in the northern parts of the metropolitan cities are very.
मैं जिस टेम्पल में जाता हूँ उसके बाहर तो दरबान बने हुए हैं. So when they have this green uniform, they're sort of guarding the temple. I don't know why that is, but uh, the the sort of जो idols भी बने हुए हैं,
Mm-hmm.
they're all very contemporary. There isn't a very dated quality to them. In fact, some of the newer temples that have been constructed really look like showrooms,
Hmm.
considering the six light display. पूरा मार्बल एकदम ब्रांड न्यू मार्बल नीचे लगा हुआ है, ऊपर सफेद एकदम बिल्कुल दीवारें हैं, एंड इन द सेंटर ऑफ द रूम ऑलमोस्ट लाइक एन एग्जिबिट देयर इज द गॉड. But the sort of temples that you see on Twitter when they like show you like a southern Indian temple जो 1700 से है या वैसे वैसे, there is meticulous craftsmanship in that. That you know, I mean, I don't blame लोगों को नए वाले बनाने हैं, but the kind of stuff that the Cholas have done, like with temples and all, right, has been phenomenal.
I think it's been phenomenal because it's followed the rules, you know. It's like there is prescribed literature. Our Shastras prescribe how the eye should look of a god. It should look like a bird drinking water, you know. A lady.
What does that mean?
Yeah. You know, within Shilpa Shastra, within so many other texts, why does Shiva look the same everywhere? Shiva looks the same
Except for
everywhere
West
because
Bengal.
someone has sat down and written that Shiva in this avatar should look like this, in this avatar should look like this, in this kind of mood or in this kind of situation with Parvati should look like this, and thus he looks like that. And sometimes there are certain vagaries in northwest, east, south, central India, but essentially, iconographically, up to the late medieval period, India was following certain norms. And now the temples are coming up. So, I mean, I love a community effort of a temple, obviously. But yes, I understand. I share your question in terms of what am I looking at? And right now, I find it more difficult to explain current day temples because they don't follow so much the prescribed norm. But back in the day, like older temples, I find it easier because I have a referential textbook. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a reason for places of worship to look beautiful, right? to
And places of worship in the past have looked beautiful. Like historically, why do we, when we go around, yes, we see Mughal forts and Mughal palaces and sarais and tombs and eidgahs and all of that. But in terms of Hindu architecture, Jain architecture, Buddhist architecture, we have a different spectrum of buildings. In terms of Hindu architecture, we have temples. In terms of Buddhist architecture, we have cave temples and monasteries or universities, right? In terms of Jain architecture, I don't recall going to any Jain cave complex. But
right.
for Buddhists, I went to a lot of cave complex. I went to prehistoric cave complexes, but I've not gone to any Hindu cave complexes. So architecture has taken its own different sort of categories within the several other religions. Within Hinduism, because it was temples, most of the other architecture, a lot of historians and archaeologists say that maybe it could have been wooden. That's why it's not survived over a long period of time. It could be mud hut, straw based architecture. But state patronized architecture of a temple within the Hindu realm, or a monastery within the Buddhist realm, or another temple in the Jain realm, also had massive economies around it. So when you go to, have you been to Hampi?
Of course.
Yes. So in Hampi, you have this long path leading up to the main temple, right?
Yes.
And that long path, current day also, it's a marketplace. And that's how exactly it would have been in the past
So
as well.
so just like बोलते हैं ना कि शहर के बीचों बीच citadel है. The citadel was a temple.
Yeah,
Right.
citadel has been used very commonly in the sense of Indus Valley civilization, but after that, it was mostly like the term is temple complex, and it's just not a temple, but it's a complex around it.
But
And
can you
there's
extrapolate that means that people at those times were far more religious or faith centric if the temple was at the center of their lives? Or is that too much of a
I don't think you can arrive at that conclusion so easily. I feel like you could definitely say that. Okay, let me explain this way. If you lived in a rural village, rural village, like no concrete, it's brick and mud, right? And suddenly someone came up with an opulent mall over there. What would you do? You would radiate towards that mall, right? So imagine back in the day, if a king came about and he built a huge temple complex in stone when every other material was different material.
Right.
He built it in stone. It was sturdy. It was always going to be there. You would always find shelter there. There's always activity happening over there. There's always something happening over there. So you could just sit around and watch the day go by as well over there. So when you build a market complex around it, so like people, it's kind of a city center, but a citadel has some sense of European meaning for me as well. So I don't understand if the definition exactly fits. But generally, yeah, it was a religious complex essentially. Because even for the Buddhist universities, I do believe to a great extent the texts and the materials that they were teaching were about Buddhism, right? So thus they were, yeah, religious
Sure.
complexes.
जैसे हम साउथ के टेम्पल्स देखते हैं, they've got those beautiful ऐसे एक बाहर वाला स्ट्रक्चर है, then one more step, they're sort of built in steps. जो उसका top होता है ना, I don't have the language to describe it, but I'm sure like if we put up a picture, people can understand what I mean, right? Just south के temples, there are a lot like that, but North India में temples are more like domes, right? Like,
Is it?
yeah,
I feel like they're far more pyramidal. Like northern temples have an apex, like Mount Meru, which is the eternal mountain, which is where all the gods and the heavens and everything resides. And then in the South Indian temple, the Dravida style temples, actually they are also going straight like a pinnacle, but there's a flattening on the top.
that's what I was gonna say.
Yes.
मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि मतलब the sort of stuff that I've seen here, it's just you're right. The apex is there, but with them it's like it goes slowly up. मतलब मैंने कुछ ऐसे भी देखे हैं जहाँ पे steps बने हुए हैं, and then on the top or like on the outside of it, each step has a bunch of like gods. Right?
Yes, so that's the outer universe that they sort of display. So that's the main burning question that people have about the Khajuraho temples, for example, right? Like, first of all, people say that, oh my God, all sorts of taglines to the Khajuraho temple. But when you actually go there, it's not so much like that. It's like just a handful of sculptures that are in that way. And what does it truly represent? It essentially represents the outside world where all sorts of activities sort of happen. And then you go into a more somber, heavenly world inside the Garbhagriha through the mandapa, and when you go inside, so the mandapa is like when you enter a temple. Okay. When you enter a temple, you have one pinnacle and then the tallest pinnacle.
Right.
Underneath the tallest pinnacle is usually the main deity or the
Correct.
main god. Have you ever thought about this? That when you go inside the main cubicle, that is probably the simplest room of the entire building.
Yes.
No matter how opulent
Yes.
it may be outside.
There is nothing ornate in there. In fact,
Exactly.
uska size, what आप वैष्णो देवी की बात कर लो, which is not a temple, right? The actual place where you will encounter the deity is tiny, like beyond comparison. वहाँ कोई भी ornate चीज नहीं है, nothing at all.
Yeah. So, and it's deliberate. People have thought about it because the house of God is rather simple. But the house outside is full of chaos. It's full of reality that is far more complex. And the house of God is a rather austere room where he inhabits the main deity.
हाँ मतलब उसके बाद you've also got like on the outside of several monuments, I'm not sure if it's temples, you've also got like depictions of sex there, right? And then in the inside there's a god. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And the outside world, when it is realistic in that way, and it follows a particular tradition of the sectarian form of Hinduism, it isn't shy to depict the entire spectrum of the universe, So that's where. So in Khajuraho, they say that it is sort of a temple that has extremely shocking imagery, sex. I feel so odd saying this out loud because I'm talking about gods in the same line, But, I feel worried about offending anyone. But yes, it is sex and it is not common sex. It's not the missionary pole.
Yeah.
It
It
is
goes
far
beyond.
more complicated than that. And it's depicted on the outside. And it's not that much. It's just, like I said, it's just a handful. In fact, you go to Konark. That's far more. Odisha, it's far, far more. But this is a form of religious worship. It is a form of religious worship that has found state patronage, that has come upon a temple. There must have been several ministers to that king who would have vetted what is going on this temple cluster. It's not just one temple, it's multiple temples. That's going on this temple cluster that is going to form the center of the Chandela University. Some of the most beautiful sculptures have come out of the Chandela dynasty, So, yeah.
If one were to do a modern day pilgrimage just to check out like amazing temples, what would you recommend?
Oh my God. This is a photo book. First of all, I would recommend everyone to go to Ajanta. It's not a temple. It's a Buddhist cave complex. It is absolutely beautiful and it is difficult to get to. You may have to take a train and you must. Go and see the earliest forms of painting of complex society over there. Oh my God, stunning. It is also those paintings that have gone all the way to Japan. Actually, the research that I was doing when I was studying and doing research in Japan was the movement of Ajanta style painting. How powerful the institution of Ajanta was to not only Southeast Asia but all of Asia up till Japan is. So please go to Ajanta. I would say that's a very interesting place. It's a horseshoe shaped canyon, and I would always recommend go in the rain because when the rock glistens on the outside and you can see the paintings on the inside, it's really beautiful. Then I would highly recommend everyone goes to Hampi and always cross the river. Go to the
To Anandgedi or the other?
Anigudi, yeah. Go to the older part of the town. Go to see what are the different communities that live there. Go to see the lake, climb the hill, all of that. I would say go to Mahabalipuram. Mahabalipuram was almost like a gateway. I would say go to a yogini temple in Odisha called the Chauset Yogini Temple in Ranipur, Jhariyal. It is in a tribal belt of Odisha. It is absolutely stunning on top of a rock plateau. It is absolutely beautiful. I would say go to the old busted up Dutch uh, outstation in Dhanushkodi. Dhanushkodi is the map of India and is the link to Sri Lanka. That area has an old outpost that was ransacked by a typhoon back in the day. And it is the most dystopic place to drive to. So I would say go there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How can I get to Dhanushkodi if I want to go tomorrow?
Fly to Rameshwaram. That's where APJ Abdul Kalam came from. And there's
Yeah.
a museum on APJ Abdul Kalam over there. And there's a museum in Shells. I love that. And then you just get onto, those RTVs, those high rise buses?
No.
Buses that have high suspension?
Double decker या नहीं कुछ
No,
और
no,
है?
no. Like the tire is there and the bus is even higher than that.
I've never seen that.
So there are some buses that are like that. And then Dhanushkodi is one of those areas where it's such a shallow sea floor. So your bus is essentially driving on top of the water.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And then there at a very long distance, you can actually walk not more than knee deep, almost a kilometer into the water, more than. Yeah.
मेरे नाना जी ने मेरे को बताया था रामेश्वरम में when his train would stop for pilgrimages, it would stop right at the tip of India.
Yeah.
That's how the station is designed apparently.
Dhanushkodi is a tip.
उससे भी आगे है.
उससे भी आगे.
इंडिया में ही है ना?
India में ही है,
So
bro.
you don't have to cross mainland and go like take a Sri Lankan visa.
No, it's India.
Okay.
It's
wonderful.
India. And like old Dutch, like big outpost, like, yeah.
And
buildings.
why is it dystopic? वहाँ पे क्या है? Like किसी ने वहाँ पे has no one.
Because a long time ago, a typhoon came and destroyed that entire outpost. So it's just khandar.
So no one has ever like
You
used
can't
it.
because high tide, low tide still affects that area badly.
Huh. So there are times when you can't go there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, noted.
Yeah.
Okay. When we sat down at your place, we were also discussing. जैसे बहुत सारे लोग बात करते हैं हाँ यार साउथ ईस्ट एशिया के अंदर इंडिया की इन्फ्लुएंस तो है ही लोग अंकुर वाट का नाम लेते हैं ये बोलते हैं कि देखो स्वर्णभूमि एयरपोर्ट ये तो भारतीय नाम ही है राइट एंड ऑल एंड इनफैक्ट स्वर्णभूमि एयरपोर्ट पर जाओ तो व्हाट ग्रीट्स यू इज द समुद्र मंथन का जो वो दैट होल इमेज इज देयर समवेयर
Yeah. Churning of the milk ocean.
churning of the ocean, right? There are all these obvious references, but I'm not sure. I mean, I was reading a bunch of research papers. लोगों ने लिखे तो हैं कि the parallels between like Japanese XYZ and Indian XYZ. They've tried to do that, but definitively beyond just Buddhism, beyond Silk Route पे trading हो रही है, beyond like Ming Dynasty, King Dynasty के लोग आ रहे हैं और यहाँ पे आके अपने ambassadors भेज रहे हैं. Beyond all of that, what was the kind of relation that say China, India, Japan, Cambodia, all of these places had with India, anywhere from medieval times, antiquity, to before the British Raj?
I think there was this consolidated landmass that we have of Asia, right? It's a connected landmass of massive countries, of distinct cultures, because the area is so far apart from each other that they could have very distinct indigenous identities. But what was noticed in the ancient and the early medieval period, and let's talk from the Indus Valley civilization period, Indians were always sort of international.
How so?
Always, because see, what do we know about the Indus Valley civilization? We don't know the language, but we do know that they built boats. They had a port in Lothal. Evidence of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and places in India and Pakistan were interacting with each other. They were taking ships and they were exchanging items.
Trade. No
Trade-
ideas at
It's
this point.
it's a well established fact that trade was happening between these three areas, right? So Indians have been international since then. And we just spoke about the tricks that Indian could even do on trade when we spoke about Odisha, right? With the magnet, the conspiracy theory of the magnet. But apart from that, as you see religion really developing and throbbing in the country, it like started with a religion that was followed probably in the Indus Valley civilization that we don't know the exact nature, but we do know they love jewelry, they love horns, they loved animals. And when you come to the late ancient period, Buddhism, Jainism, Brahmanism, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, and the beginnings of Shakta are starting, right? The beginnings of esoteric. So it's gone the entire journey. It started from a simplistic idea, but it was by no means simplistic, because even when you read the Vedas, which is like really at the inception of Hinduism, it is not simple in any way. It's deep philosophical thought. And it has gone into the esoteric. And so when it is going into the esoteric, it becomes really fascinating to the rest of Asia. So what starts happening is that you have around this time a lot of Chinese travelers coming into India, a lot of people from Southeast Asia inviting Indians to come to Southeast Asia. So
For
when you
what
go,
exactly? मतलब कि bilateral talks तो नहीं चल रही हैं वहाँ पे. They're not like
it's not like bilateral talks. It's like, oh my God, you're building these massive temples. Can you build them here? Like
so
it's like
emulation. Like help us do something here.
it was in seeking guidance to a great extent, according to popular scholarly consensus, on state building. You have a language, you are building city centers, not a city,
Yeah.
but a city center. You
No,
remember?
But why would they? For example, मैंने एक छोटा सा paper देखा that said that Korea and Japan became stable societies because they learned statecraft from China. So like,
Yeah.
but like, why would they learn it from us? Because
Well, China was also at the time collecting information and intel from all over, like Indians. India had a lot of Chinese travelers come to India. And they went far and wide, and they collected manuscripts. Yun Sang, I Ching, all of these names we've studied in our
course.
in our schools. But these people, there are still very important referential texts even for us historians, even till today. So sometimes we look at the relevance of an important place by looking at their text, like, oh, this is a historic place because this guy spoke about this place, right? So China too had a very rich culture of its own, and its own deep philosophical streams that were guiding its entire country. But it did also pick up a lot on Buddhism. Buddhism is an Indian efflorescence, essentially. The Buddha was actually born in Nepal, right? In Lumbini.
Sorry, you said Buddhism is like a Florence.
Efflorescence.
Efflorescence.
Indian efflorescence. Like
Okay.
it came about, got promoted, it got stately patronized by a king like Ashoka. Ashoka was like, okay, I understand these principles, I understand these formulations, and I understand this ethic, right? And I want to follow it, and I want to preach it amongst my peers as well, because it may have helped me. And we all know about the story of Ashoka. He went to Kalinga,
Right.
and he had this extremely bloody war. And then after that, he embraced that. And it even happened with Akbar, for example. Akbar went into several wars, and expanded it and consolidated and sealed in his kingdom, right? And it was after that that he launched into Sulaykul, right? Sulaykul was a philosophical stream that Akbar had was promoting amongst his people of peace, and so I think Buddhism at the time, coming back to Southeast Asia, China, East Asia, Buddhism in India at that particular point in time was not only thriving but intellectually becoming really important. Universities started coming up. Royal kings were building stupas. The relics of the Buddhas it was a real person. And the realness of the Buddha was embedded in how his relics were distributed across not only India but across Southeast Asia. You see, the hair of the Buddha, the tooth of the Buddha, the nail of the Buddha, the bone of the Buddha. What are stupas? Stupas initially were built to keep these particular relics. Do you know the National Museum in Delhi has a relic of the Buddha?
I had no idea.
Actually from his human body?
Yeah.
It does. And if you go there, there is an entire altarpiece. And on several good days, you will see several monks coming from different countries just sitting in front of the relic of the Buddha and praising the Lord.
I remember going to Sarnath, like as a kid, And I remember वो उस पे कुछ yellow yellow डाल रहे थे. They just sort of put stuff. And I'm wondering, is that like a tomb?
The you see the cylindrical
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
shaped. That's also a stupa. That's a different kind of a style of a stupa. But a stupa is essentially a solid piece of architecture, and it has, on top it has the amalaka. It has a pinnacle, and then it has these concentric circles running down, and a pipe running right down, and then there is a little shaft area,
Hmm.
and that is where you keep a reliquary. A reliquary is an old thing, maybe a piece of a body of a holy person, or an important script, or an important piece of jewelry, or a nugget of gold, or whatever. You
Hmm.
keep it in that, and then you create the stupa. And it has no entry points or exit. It is a perfect cylinder, completely concrete.
You can't necessarily go as a grave robber and try to like get the relic out.
It's yeah, but, I mean, you'll have to break the entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what still begs the question is कि ठीक है, so there's massively trade happening between China and India and in medieval times and antiquity and even after that, right? और सारी countries भी आ रही है. But statecraft में वो क्या कर रहे हैं? Are they going to Odisha, for example, like some envoys of like some dynasty in China? Are they going to Odisha and saying कि bro, आप लोग, how do you, for example, do taxes? Because we have problems with doing taxes in China. Come help us out with that. Or Shanghai thinks that, we can be better at population management. Like, what exactly is this? Are they exchanging practices? Are they exchanging manuscripts? Like, what is this
So I
exactly?
think back in the day, they obviously looked upon India as a country that had cracked the code for statecraft, and it had a formal system of architecture that was regionally diverse back from that time.
Mm-hmm.
And back from an older period when they started noticing. They're like, okay, they've been doing this for a long time, right? So then they started actually inviting scholars to their particular country. And a lot of countries, for example, like Cambodia, the origin theory of the big empire that actually took on had some relation with India. So you would also go to their monuments, you would see that an Indian priest is distinctly and iconographically represented. And that would be a long triangular beard coming down, and him sitting exactly how we are sitting.
Cross-legged.
Yeah, and these priests were sort of, now there are several schools of thought over here. There are several schools of historians. One is also the Orientalists that have looked at, back in the day there were historians who called it the Indianization of Southeast Asia, and Southeast Asia was a larger parts of Southeast Asia was a French colony, right?
Sure.
The French, the Cambodia was dominated by the French, and when the French historians were writing, just as in India, British historians were writing, the French were writing. A lot of books were titled "The Indianization of Southeast Asia." Right, scholars like Sedez or Codez, however you call it, it's a French pronunciation, but they call it the Indianization of Southeast Asia, which is almost debunked because it was kind of proof that Indians never went in warships to sort of capture this land and make it Indian. Instead, it was the fascination of areas in the Southeast Asia that invited Indians that, can you also bring us in on this state building legitimization structure that you have sort of cracked? So whether it is building massive temples, why are there temples in Southeast Asia? Why do they look so similar to Indian temples? Why are there temple complexes with the same philosophy of a bazaar leading up to a temple? So what is this concept, right? Obviously, there is inter learning from each other, and that's what we notice consistently in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, in almost as far as certain parts of China, because certain parts of China mimic the Ajanta cave painting format. And it is exactly the same in terms of prescriptive form of architecture. So why? And I think this was a great period. The early medieval period was a great period of history between Southeast Asia and India. Even within India, empires like the Ahom kingdom in Assam started getting established that had interrelations with these sort of things. So this has been one of the most fascinating subjects of my study, because when I went abroad to study, um,
Where? Oxford or some
in
University of
SOAS,
Kyoto?
School of Oriental and African Studies in London, um, and I was studying the art history and archaeology, and my module was Indian temple, and I had to select the second. And I said, let me study Southeast Asia because it was totally alien to me. That was the reason I actually picked the subject.
Hmm.
I knew nothing about it. I studied nothing. But literally, the first class when I went, the first temple that they showed me, I was like, oh my God, it looks so Indian. And the thing with academia, and I did history honors in one of the best colleges, was that it never even investigated that question. And I think with me, when I first saw it, my curiosity started. And when I started investigating that question, it was such a powerful story of what India was back in the day that to this day fascinates me. I feel like I don't have enough, I'm not giving it enough time to go back to that subject matter, but it is such a strong subject matter. When Angkor Wat was being built, around the same time, the Jagannath temple in Orissa was being built. You see? And Angkor Wat is a temple that worships Lord Vishnu,
Correct.
right? Jagannath temple is a Vaishnava temple, correct? East of India, major port point, Angkor Wat at a major port point.
You wonder who was commissioning both their
In
constructions
fact, there
at the
is
same
strong
time.
evidence to indicate that the same architect of Jagannath temple and Angkor Wat was consulted on building of these two temples. Divakara Pandita is his name. And I think there is a scholar called Peter Sharrock and Alexis Sanderson from Oxford have spoken about this probable possibility of Divakara Pandita advising the construction and the architecture of both these temples. And recently, when I went there, and I urged scholars to look into it, recently when I went there, Angkor Wat is known as these temples with the pineapple towers. You know, it's almost like flames going up. And it's the same thing, a pinnacle, right? And when you go to Jagannath temple, it is not so evidently like that. But when you look cautiously, when you look carefully, there are some elements of that same kind of structure that comes over there. So there is a sort of, it's no doubt in any scholar's mind that the interaction between very important Indian architects, Indian scholars, Indian priests, Indian religious community and Southeast Asia were very, very prominent. They were guiding them even on iconography for that matter. You know, how a sculpture should be made. And why do you guide someone on that? Because when you make a sculpture a certain way, then God will come and reside in it. But if you don't make it that way, then God will not come. So what's the point of it all? You know, so there's very strong evidence, but very few people.
Or
believe it.
जो ये Jagannath temple and Angkor Wat, do we have evidence of like who was ruling these places at the same time? Different rulers, or was there like a
Completely
secret
different
monarch?
rulers. Suryavarman II was ruling Cambodia at the time, and he was the greatest king of that particular point in time.
Surya Varma.
Suryavarman II.
Surya Varman is ruling Cambodia.
Yeah, what an Indian name.
Huh.
Look at the name.
And does he have Mongolite features? Do we know that, or is he?
I don't know, and I don't know if that term is appropriate.
No, it is pretty appropriate. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just seen sculptural representations of him. He loved to wear a crown which went somewhat outside and on top had a pyramid. Gold. He loved gold. He loved big earrings. Yeah. And in Cambodia, what they believed was, so what they borrowed from India was a kind of a philosophy where the king is a theological head of the state. That means the king is actually a god. So what happens is this massive temple is built. The king sculpture is made, the god sculpture is made, and huge ritualistic ceremony is done. And then, as the god comes and resides in the image of the sculptural representation of the god, it also comes and resides in the king. So he becomes the theosophical head of this. It was called the Deva Raja cult, you know. And Suryavarman II was the largest, believed to be the most stable king of them all. After that came this king called Jayavarman VII. He's my favorite guy.
Why is that?
I love this guy because his temples are so cool. So right next to Angkor Wat is an even bigger complex called, this is called Angkor Wat. This complex is called Angkor Thom.
Why do we not hear about that more?
You've seen it in movies, actually. You've seen it in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, where you've seen these temples with these faces coming out. And that's actually the king right after the guy who built Angkor Wat. So this guy is Jayavarman the Seventh, and he was following Vaishnavism. He switched to Buddhism, but like Tantric Buddhism, right?
Interesting.
And he started following a Hevajra cult. And this guy
Sorry,
was
what is that?
Hevajra cult is a kind of deity in Buddhism who is very fierce, who dances violently.
थोड़ा सा मेरे को backtrack करना पड़ेगा. I've always believed as a layman, I mean, despite the fact that we had a discussion on Buddhism last time, but I did not read up after that at all. I always thought that there is one Buddha, right? So what are these deities in Buddhism?
Okay. We have to go into the academics of Buddhism. So there is one Buddha. His name is Siddhartha.
Right.
And he came from a royal king, a royal family from the Sakya clan, born in Lumbini in Nepal, and then left his palace. And when he left his palace, he became a wandering ascetic, and then he did hard penance, and then decided the middle path, and then eventually attained enlightenment. And once he attained enlightenment, then he collected a few disciples and he started preaching his knowledge.
No, the Buddhism story is clear. Siddhartha's story is clear, yeah.
After this, he died.
अच्छा. ठीक है.
So he collected some disciples.
Then he unfortunately passed away.
And then he unfortunately passed away because he was a real human being.
Yeah.
But his teachings got carried on.
Yeah, of course.
His teachings got carried on. And with his teachings and his disciples, that philosophical thought constantly getting revised. So in the Buddhist habit earlier was, if you want to become a Buddhist, you must wander. You must follow the Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths. You must believe in impermanence, and the middle path is going to help you out. But during the rainy season, you must gather at a particular monastery, and thus this is when cave architecture started coming around, because it's very natural. It's in the realm of the planet, you know. And when you sit there, why do caves have so many paintings and sculptures? Because these people were actually spending a lot of time there during the rainy season, during the monsoons of India, and thus emerged these extremely expressive caves of India, right? You have some of the most opulent paintings from Ajanta to the most elaborate carvings of several other Buddhist caves. So when they met at this cave, their rule was to recite the Vinaya. The Vinaya is a rule book for the Buddhists. As you recite the Vinaya, sometimes syllabus gets boring.
Yeah.
So you start doing commentary on the Vinaya. And thus, as commentary started coming about in that religion, it started breaking up. When it started breaking up, it became from the original form of Buddhism, that is Theravada, which used to also be called the Hinayana form of Buddhism, to Mahayana. There people started meditating a lot. People started ritualizing a lot. People started using art a lot. And when that happened, the concept of bodhisattvas started coming. More and more people started attaining enlightenment. And the concept, I think we spoke about it in a last podcast, actually. When you attain enlightenment, but you decide to stay in this world and preach the word of God and not go into nothingness, you know, that's when you're called a bodhisattva. When you hold on to purpose.
But where's the deity come from then?
Deities come from the bodhisattvas, essentially.
Okay, so they're the people
from
who
the
attained
bodhisattvas.
enlightenment.
Yeah, there's several kinds of bodhisattvas that come about.
Yeah.
That's
But
when,
then can you deify them and worship them later on as a practitioner of
absolutely,
Buddhism?
because all of them have their specific teachings, right?
Okay.
And they have their specific sort of leanings that you could sort of abide by. Like, for example, Thailand worships a lot of Maitreya. Why Maitreya? Because Maitreya is the bodhisattva of the future. That when Maitreya comes to this planet Earth, when you show your devotion, you all will be taken to heaven together.
Who is Maitreya?
Maitreya is also kind of bodhisattva. You know, when Mahayana Buddhism increased, several of these deities attained enlightenment and decided to stay within the universe that can still interact.
And do they have like defining features, or do they all look at least in sculptures and paintings, like the Buddha himself, like the
No,
first
they
Buddha?
all have very distinct. Akshobhya looks different from Maitreya, looks different from Vajrapani, looks different from Padmasambhava, looks different. So all of these iconography, what we spoke about, I keep using this term. Allow me to describe it. It
Please.
is the science of symbols within religious deities. So Shiva has a trishul, has a snake around his neck, has a particular hairstyle with a water spout coming out. All of these signs are part of the science of iconography. It's what helps you distinguish what deity this is, what is the meaning of each of these signs philosophically, and why do they exist over there.
So
What is the backstory?
are there schools of iconography that you can sort of divide deities into? Like, are there, for example, other deities that you can tell are...
No, they're not schools of iconography. They're schools of religion. They're groups of and sects of religion. But iconography is just the breaking down of the symbology between all of these religions.
Many years ago, I
It's a
remember...
response.
Okay.
Responsive science.
Response to...
Responsive science.
Okay.
So it's, yes, iconography was prescriptive literature in Indian Shastras back in the day. Shilpa Shastras also give you the idea of iconography. But currently, iconography is us trying to decode the backstory. We're not looking at the Shilpa Shastras. We're more like memorizing the iconography.
बहुत साल पहले on Twitter, I remember watching this picture of a Buddha. और उनकी वो lungs दिख रही थी.
हाँ.
और वो ribs दिख रही थी. And he had a beard.
Yeah.
And the person who posted it, I think his name is Snake Oil Salesman, he said he remember being moved to tears by watching that.
Yeah.
Because you always see, well, you see the laughing Buddha, which is, being reappropriated by Good Earth. They sell a lot of laughing Buddhas. And then you have the standard Gautama. Everyone knows the Gautama, right?
Mm.
But then this particular Buddha with his beard and looking emaciated. So what I'm trying to ask, is that a Bodhisattva then?
No, that is the Buddha himself within his lifetime. So when he came out of his palace, he saw certain things like suffering in the world, right?
Real truths जो दुनिया में होते हैं,
Real
हाँ.
truths. He saw,
Death, disease,
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
दो और चीजें थी, हाँ.
Exactly. So when he did see that, he said he left on his horse, and there are several sculptures even in the National Museum that you can admire that show that last moment of him leaving his previous life. And then he went into finding the real meaning of life. And then he went into extreme penance. And at that particular point in time, within Hinduism, that extreme penance was already the way of finding moksha. Okay. He was trying to find moksha was already a popular concept, popular term, and people went through deep promises to the universe and to themselves, like मैं हाथ खड़ा रखूंगा तो हाथ खड़ा रखूंगा, मैं पानी नहीं पीऊंगा तो पानी नहीं पीऊंगा, मैं नाखून नहीं काटूंगा तो नाखून नहीं काटूंगा, like that. The Buddha tried that, and that moment shows his most emaciated body, with the nerves and the bones and the eye sockets completely sunken in. The best example of that sculpture is actually in the Lahore Museum. There's also a fantastic example at the Mathura Museum in India. So it was at that moment that he decided that there is no reason to extremities. There is more meaning in the middle path. And that's when he went back to choosing, sort of thinking another way from what was prescribed, from the extreme penance way. And that's where the philosophy and the concept of the middle path became extremely important and popular. It was a completely different intellectual stream of thinking. There were, and before this, mind you, there were several intellectual streams of thinking within Brahmanism as well, within the caste system as well, within the outcast way of reacting to the caste system as well. There are several ways of thinking around that time. But this was a person who chose the middle path after having tried, and that sculpture represents that he went there, but then he decided that that was not it.
When scholars like you study Buddhism, and you've studied it for a long time, and Indology, do meditation practices ever factor into the academia part of things, or is that something that you discount or dismiss as maybe like let's say Vipassana, for example, right?
You've done Vipassana.
I've done it once. I won't. I don't think I would do it again.
You didn't like it?
I liked it, but I
I've never
prefer to
done
eat
it.
meat more. I don't. They won't give me meat.
Yeah.
Which is I was thinking about it. with एक अलग बात है, but because right, जब मैंने विपासना करी, it's the idea that was given to me, and this might be controversial, was like कि बुद्धा की असली टीचिंग तो ये थी कि बुद्धा ने जो बाकी सारी बातें बोली हैं वो लोग कर रहे हैं. That's the religious thinking. Actually तो ये है कि this is Buddha's true contribution to the world, कि ये टेक्निक है.
What technique are you talking about?
The Vipassana technique. Anapana, Vipassana, and then Mata.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have what you've talked about is vastly different from my immersion into Buddhism, which is the practice of Vipassana. You know, when you read about this, when you write about this, do these meditation practices become a core part of the scholarship?
I think a lot of, like, there was a very important Buddhist scholar called Benoitosh Bhattacharya. He wrote some fantastic books on all streams of Buddhism. My favorite of his was on Vajrayana Buddhism or Tantric Buddhism. And he himself experimented a lot with what was prescribed in the text. He's like, let me try it out. And he himself has spoken in his preface to some of his books how he did a particular meditation of the green Tara. He did, and that's a kind of a Buddhist goddess, green color bodhisattva. And he meditated upon her. And, you know, when you do meditate upon in Vajrayana Buddhism, you have these seed bija mantras, you know, Om, Hrim, Krim, you know.
Bij mantra to like in normal Sanatana
Yeah,
Dharma
in normal
also,
scenarios also. So, but there is a prescription to how you read them so that you can visualize her, and then she emerges in front of you. So, a lot of scholars do experiment with that and do try that. I do feel myself that when I have read so much about it, sometimes I've been curious to do the efficacy of it, but modern city life does not allow you so much also.
Talking about modern city life, यहाँ से Piano Man का रास्ता is a 15-minute walk,
Oh, really?
right? And I had two options कि मैं गाड़ी में जा सकता हूँ or do I walk? But then I remembered the spirit of Delhi houses,
Yeah.
right? And but weird है because I usually have been a very commuter. I've always lived in a commuter lifestyle, right? Commuting from satellite city to big city to big city to small city to taking a flight, right? And then walking is usually reserved for parks in a circuit. Never exploratory walking, right? The sort of walking that you do, for example. Or the sort of walking that वो लोग जो करते हैं जो शहरों में जाके serendipity ढूंढते हैं या मिल जाती है उनको because वो walk कर रहे होते हैं, they suddenly chance upon a street or a corner that they did not expect कि वहाँ पे है, but because they let go of the map and they followed instinct or even curiosity or beauty, they arrived there. So I was still following a map because I couldn't, you know, go from here to Panama directly. I didn't have the spatial awareness. वो कहाँ पे है? But I went to this place called Arjun Nagar. I've only seen Arjun Nagar on Magic Bricks when you're looking for a place to rent, right? So Arjun Nagar is a small.
Magic bricks.
ठीक है ऐसे यार हाँ मतलब मैं थोड़ी रहता हूँ यहाँ पे. So अब वो गलियाँ narrow dense हैं. You see how it sort of goes from normal Safdarjung, Horse Khas, Aurobindo market wala big spaces to like a more condensed locality, colony type की जो चीज़ होती है, right? ऊपर वहाँ पे वायर वगैरह पास होते हैं, लोग पास होते हैं. Only a small Zen or a scooty or a cycle can go through it. And as you keep walking, you notice there are all these mom and pop stores that have no names, right? And आगे चलते रहो. Eventually I realized the way to get to Piano Man, you cross this narrow street of Arjun Nagar, then it goes into a smaller by lane that has only enough space for two people to rub their shoulders. And it goes on for almost 200 meters. And in that 200 meter by lane, there are also shops on the sides, जहाँ पे लोग अपना वो कर रहे हैं. And when I was, अगर मैं गाड़ी से जाता, I'd be like, हाँ मैं अनिका से मिलने जा रहा हूँ Piano Man में. I would not have that experience. But I felt positively vitalized कि damn man, you can really sort of chance at, I don't know, like everyday architectural beauty or like, you know, like you turn a corner and your life changes. That's what I felt like.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you felt like that. I feel like, yeah, walking in the city, I mean, it's too hot, huh? Have you been seeing how many people have been dying because of the heat stroke?
No, I don't read the news.
The BBC said that the summers in India are going to be beyond human survivability limits
This time.
this time.
ठीक है,
And
निकलने का time आ
already
गया.
several people have died via heat stroke.
अभी तो May hasn't arrived yet, so we're not in the worst of it.
Well, that's happening. But no, I think the field that I work in, my I I have a recurring dream, a bad dream that I'll go blind. Yeah, that I'm climbing this really steep slope to my old boarding school in Missouri, and somehow I cannot see at the sky, and I'm blind. I'm blind. I can't see. You know, and that is my biggest fear, and I am Chashmish, so it's not so far away. You know, but this thing about my love affair with homes, and fortunately I live in Delhi, and houses over here have such a deep sense of history, um, has certainly invigorated my walks. But at the same time, I've formed a very intimate relationship with the city in terms of learning what the identity of a city is. You know, Delhi is a capital city, right? Are you following? Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes,
Does
yes,
it make
of course,
sense?
of course.
Yeah. So this is this new
If
habit.
I do, then it's gonna be a little distracting to listeners. I realize that.
Yeah. No. So this city, as I have been exploring it, I've been exploring it. Like I grew up near Singhu border in
Of course.
the city, right? And I went to school or college, and thus I traversed a vast amount of the city. And so, learning from driving across that city, I've also understood that the city has ancient history, yes, but post-partition history, very interesting. Very interesting. Because when partition happened in India, all of Delhi essentially emptied out. The last time something like this, the city emptying out, was when Muhammad bin Tughlaq was the ruler.
When you say emptying out, मतलब कि almost सारे लोग निकल गए थे.
सारे लोग निकल गए
तो
थे.
यहाँ पर अब रहता कौन है?
What was the city center of Delhi? Tell me. At that particular point in time, the city center was Old Delhi.
ऊपर north में ये तीस
Yes.
हासरी की तरफ.
Old Delhi. And the rest of Delhi that was built, who was living there? The British.
South Central Delhi is all British.
There was no South Delhi around that time.
जो ये जमाली कमाली वाला टूर कराते हैं विलियम डैलरिम्पल, that's all.
Mehrauli was there, and Bahadur Shah Zafar had Zafar Mahal over there.
हाँ,
But that was when he was going hunting.
okay.
These areas were far off areas when you were living at the Red Fort. Mind you, you don't have a car. You're going on horseback or a carriage around that time. So, Mehrauli was considered another outpost of another
Yeah.
kind of king.
So the center is the north. That means the north must be like all the way up in Haryana.
I mean, when Chandni Chowk was happening, right? When Chandni Chowk was happening, it was the most exotic, opulent, international market. It was the Harrods of the East.
What?
Yes.
चांदनी चौक.
Yes.
जहाँ लोग
Look
जाके
at old.
ओल्ड दिल्ली में वो फोटोग्राफी टूर्स करते हैं और लोग पराठे खाते हैं. What are you saying, bro?
Have you been to Chandni Chowk?
A long time
Have you
ago.
been the richness? Have you seen the
I've seen
richness
the
of Chandni
stacks
Chowk?
of cash.
Yes. Do you see the best jewelers where they come from? Chandni Chowk.
Haven't had the time to.
Have you
jewelry.
seen Chandni Chowk? Oh my God, there are so many palaces, so many Havelis over there. Do you know about
Palaces and Havelis in Chandni Chowk?
You do not know that.
No.
Do you know about Begum Samru? Did I
Nahi.
already speak about
I know
her
the
with
only
you?
Begum I know is one, the band, two, Begum Hazrat Mahal. Yeah.
Okay, Begum Samru. Begum Samru is one of my favorite ladies. I cannot stop talking about her. But she was a courtesan who has a big palace called Bhagirath Palace. Where does the term come from? Begum Samru's palace. She was quite a short lady, not very good looking, but maybe in her youth she was better. She got married to a Dutchman. And when she got married to a Dutchman, she became this and she converted to Christianity as well. She became this conniving, very calculated, but very powerful lady who almost controlled a Christian empire. And she set up her capital around Meerut in this area called Sardana, where there is this beautiful, massive, massive, massive church with marble that was imported from Italy, with artisans who were gotten from there. She actually got validated by not directly the Vatican, but an important church of the Vatican, and it is still on display at this church in Sardana, um,
A Christian empire
a Christian empire.
with like Jesus at the top, not like British identity, but Jesus, Christianity at the center.
Christianity at the center, huge church, and it was a short courtesan from Chowdi Bazaar who was ruling
What
this.
time period is
By
this?
the way, do you know the entire amount of money after she died is still disputed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what time period is this?
This is like late, mid to late 1800s.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how do you consolidate like Christians? Like, are these Indian Christians?
She was married to a Westerner, right? She was
Uh-huh.
married to a man called Reinhardt, and he was called Somber, So that's why her name became Samru, because he was like a grump, basically. And he had married her, and she was called Begum Samru because of that. And Chandni Chowk has one of her palaces. It's still there when you go there, in Bhagirath Palace area. It's a protected monument.
Who are some unknown, I say, protagonists of the shaping of Delhi? सबको पता है कि जो obviously freedom struggle वाले लोग हैं. Everyone knows Lutyens, everyone knows like the big people, but like who are some of these like outpost people like this Begum Samru that you're talking about?
Razia Sultan, do you remember her?
No, it's not like
Razia
I'm friends with her.
Sultan's grave still sits in this area of Chandni Chowk called Chitli Kabar.
Who is she?
And Razia Sultan is an old empress of Delhi, and she, I think, had an Abyssinian slave lover. And if
India
I'm
में
not
पहुंच गया Abyssinian slave.
Abyssinian slave lover. India was international from a long time ago.
अभी तो सारे expat चाणक्यपुरी में हैं.
And Vasant Bihar.
And Safdarjung.
Yeah. Not so much. They're more the foreign company workers.
Okay, right. A lot of IFS people here, but yeah.
But Razia Sultan, her grave is still there, and she had an Abyssinian slave lover, and I think they even had 2 children, because when you do go to her grave, you see 2 small child graves there, which nobody has direct evidence of what they are, but it's easy to assume.
That's pretty insane. It still begs the question कि आप एक शहर के अंदर रहते हो, you're sort of stuck in your routines, and you're pretty rigid. And you know, Delhi is not really like, मेरे को last time I did it and people said कितने privileged लोग हैं, because I said, you know, Delhi is not a very walkable city, and people are like, oh, ये तो privileged लोग बोल सकते हैं. But what I meant to say is it doesn't have like the most cleanest, interconnected like network of walkways that are not stopped by something.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Delhi is an old city. If you go to Gurgaon, if you go to Faridabad, if you go to Noida, it looks very shiny and new. But Delhi looks like an old city with the
I prefer it.
infrastructure. I love it too. Like I love the city, but you're so right. There isn't an interconnected pavement. There isn't an uninterrupted pavement in the city, right? And I think that is also a reason why Delhi people are so like in your face, because they're like really just trying to walk here. तेरे को दिख नहीं रहा. तेरे को दिखता नहीं क्या? So they are a bit like that. But it is a city that is throbbing with history. Even newer places like you asked me, South Delhi when back. South Delhi did not exist. Lutyens was the southernmost extent of Delhi that time, right? Lutyens Delhi. But then post-independent India, slowly, the Delhi started expanding. For example, with Lutyens, there were several other Indian architects that worked with them. Sujan Singh was one of them. So Sujan Singh Park came about near Khan Market, which looks very similar to the colonial, to the British. Where did Princess Diana and all of these people live when they didn't live at the Buckingham Palace? It looked like that same residential complex over there, right? beautiful gardens and everything. And then slowly, slowly, outside Lutyens, Delhi started increasing, and Delhi also became outposts like Gulmohar Park was for the journalists, Niti Bagh was for the judges. Certain
Anand Lok
areas,
is for the industrialists.
uh,
Yeah.
Mayfair Gardens was for the Sindhi businessmen.
मीफेयर गार्डन तो यूके में भी है, लंदन में है.
Yeah, naam mein dam hai.
What about West End? There's a small place called West End here, no?
Oh yeah, West End and Shanti Niketan and all of that. I hear the most popular stories about those areas is that much later, I think around the 60s, 70s, that land was being sold for nothing and people were being pushed to buy land over there so they could settle in over there and build their homes over there.
बताओ आज के टाइम पे खरीद ही नहीं सकते आप.
Exactly, 60s, 70s. And I still hear some grandpas. Actually, my partner's father tells me, oh, my father, he used to work with the government. He was told to buy land here for like 100 rupees unit. I don't know. I can't remember the unit. And now it's selling for so many crores. It's like, yeah, because the big plot sizes over here, are worth a lot more money.
Yeah, I wonder what would it cost now to say buy like a big house. I don't think you can buy a house in Lutyens Delhi. Like you can't buy a house on Prithviraj Road, can you?
There are apartment complexes there as well.
है ना, मतलब otherwise the
Like
government allowed
Prithviraj
होते
Road
हैं.
has the Atlantis apartment complexes.
Okay.
Sujan Singh Park is an apartment complex. There are, but it is indeed very expensive, and it is indeed very tedious to live there as well because
Why is it
these
tedious?
these historic zones come in the Lutyens bungalow zone. So when you come under the Lutyens bungalow zone, any redevelopment that you need to do, any upgradations that you need to do, there is a separate problem. There are a lot of touts roaming around. As soon as they see construction material, they're like, "हाँ, हम यहाँ पर इस authority से आए हैं, आपका fine लगेगा." Actually, there's no such thing as a fine. There is actually just a notice. I went and asked certain officers, and I said, "Is there a fine?" Anyway, there's like, "No, there's no fine. They can just give you a notice and they give you time to respond to it." But again, check your resources. This is just from one perspective. But it is very tedious to upgrade your house in those areas because they're historically so important. And most of these areas are also near historic monuments, so come within regulated areas. Thus, it becomes important to just continue living there over a long period of time unless you like the analog life and you can maintain that.
Analog ऐसा क्या है, मतलब 100 साल पुराना स्विच बोर्ड है.
हाँ भैया, बट अगर तुम्हें सेंट्रल हीटिंग चाहिए तो वो तो नहीं हो सकता ना इतनी
Of
आसानी
course,
से.
what I'm saying is like to do redevelopment there, like it will be a problem for them. So their
To
best bet is
bust
to
up a building and reconstruct another building is
Yeah.
very, very tedious.
also take on builder floors, bro.
But the thing is like, is architecture disposable in India? I think currently in our generation and the generation just before us, like our parents also generation, they look at architecture in a very disposable way.
They do.
Yeah,
Where like इसको तोड़ के नया बना लो,
correct.
है ना? But it's
Yeah.
also, it comes from a very different new rich mentality where nothing is passed down, everything is sort of made. So the idea of preserving the past goes away. And it's almost like अब नया, अब आप क्या कर रहे हो कि माइग्रेंट हो, दिल्ली में बहुत सारे माइग्रेंट्स हैं जहाँ यहाँ पे आके बसे हैं. So the sense of nostalgia or beauty is more around memory and relationships and less around architecture. That's what I feel. कि क्या है कि अब हमने पैसे बना लिए, हम मतलब फलाने पंजाबी बिजनेस मैंने तोड़ो नया
Yeah,
बनाओ.
but the other side of this is like there are so many disputed houses that people get so nostalgic and so emotional about the houses कि वो वैसे का वैसे ही पड़े रहे, वो land मतलब waste होता रहे, but उस घर को कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए.
You made a post on Instagram saying कि how would you live in a house? Something along those lines. मेरे को बड़ा अच्छा लगा वो आइडिया कि जैसे मैं सोचता हूँ, जैसे हम जाते थे यहाँ पे बचपन में, आप जाते हो फरीदाबाद से कनॉट प्लेस घूमने के लिए. Back when like this is a time when I was so young that there was no South Delhi to really go to beyond Funky Orbit Ansel Plaza में. You know, because और कुछ था ही नहीं यहाँ पे. There was-
Funky Orbit,
You remember
yes.
Funky Orbit?
I remember that, yes.
So for us, Delhi meant Funky Orbit जाना, ठीक है, या फिर CP जाना, because the inner outer circle still remained. And on the way you had to pass through Lutyens Delhi. Lutyens Delhi is so beautiful. It is, in my opinion, it is the most beautiful part of the entire city, right? I know the government lives there, whatever, but it's so gorgeous to look at, right? And my dad would say, it'd be great to have a house here. you know.
Yeah.
And I grew up with this dream, sort of passed down. और अब मैं जाता हूँ, मैं देखता हूँ यार सरकार में तो नहीं आना है. So what is another way to like make sure that you have a house there? And then you made that post. It got me thinking like if I would live there, how would I do it? It's such a good thought experiment. Like if you lived in a Bandra West old dilapidated 3 BHK Sindhi society, how would you live there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you buy bread from the person who came in the morning on the bicycle? Would you sit out on your veranda? You know, the other day, yeah, this thing of how would you live in a home is what makes you really become very romantic about personal spaces or domestic spaces rather. My favorite thing to do is look at a kitchen, you know, to look at a home's kitchen, you know, to smell the smells and to walk about and open your crockery cupboards. I just love it because crockery cupboards are also heirloomy, you know. ये मेरी mom ने plate दिया है मेरे को.
बहुत सारे लोगों के लिए
It's
होता है.
very heirloomy. It's full of memory. So
Yeah.
it's like opening a Pandora's box if you open a
I don't know if
crockery
it
cupboard.
still exists, but I remember शादियों में ये सिल्वर की वो सब चीजें देना बड़ा आम था और उस पे फिर वो
Suspicious.
एनग्रेविंग भी करते थे ना.
Yes. And I think there are a couple of those katoris in my house that are engraved with the names and things like that. But you know, I feel like it's like a Pandora's box of memories and these crockery cupboards. But if there is a Godrej cupboard, right, that's it, game over.
Yeah.
That stuff has seen too much stuff. So in Japan, for example, you have fantastic second-hand stores. You know why? Because there is a popular belief over there that if you own something for too long, it will inhabit a spirit of its own. And in fact, if you look at a lot of Studio Ghibli movies as well, like Spirited Away, you know, some of these old abandoned villages essentially have spirits of their own that come to live at a certain point in time of the day. Thus, people give their things away. Similarly, like a Godrej cupboard, I feel like Godrej cupboard, like because in India we have the habit of like keeping things with us, like heirloomy. We don't.
We're all
really-
hoarders.
Yeah, we are all
Yeah,
hoarders.
minimalism.
Or there is a kabadi
nahi hai.
wala,
Haan.
right? There is no second-hand store. There is no like recycling economy. There's a kabadi wala or there's this thing. So actually, kabadi walas are the old recyclers of back in the day, right? And in fact, some of the most prominent kabadi walas became some of the most opulent antique dealers of India.
Really?
Yes.
क्योंकि लोग अपना क्या मतलब कोई बहुत महंगा पेंडेंट फेंक रहे होते थे. Like what is?
No, important crockery.
Because you're literally saying litter equal to gold. That's what
I
you're
think
saying.
a lot what happened was when colonialism ended in India and the British started leaving, a lot of their homes, summer homes, Anglo-Indian homes, etc., started, you know, sort of giving away their things while they got on with a newer life. And kabadiwalas started accumulating that. Similarly, when partition happened, a lot of things just got left behind, thus later on discarded, if not adopted, right? And thus kabadiwalas kept acquiring a lot of things. And some of the most important antique dealers in a lot of old colonial outposts, for example, come from that background. You know?
Twitter पे this guy called Sadaf Hussain. He runs this podcast called the Naan Curry Podcast about food. It's a brilliant podcast. उसने एक tweet करी where this dude is standing with this long silver एक ऐसी pin है और उसे बोलते हैं कान मैली है. Do you know what those are? जो कान का गंद साफ करते हैं.
Yeah.
And I remember 2012 के अंदर we were standing outside the US embassy, my dad and I, and मैं और मेरा एक दोस्त हम लोग वो जो स्कूल से जो ऑरलैंडो की ट्रिप नहीं भेजते न्यूजीलैंड और न्यूजीलैंड कह रहा हूँ डिज्नीलैंड वाली भेजते हैं कि आप नासा एंड डिज्नीलैंड इज व्हाट यू डू राइट. So we had gone to apply for that. So me and my friend came out and my dad and his dad were there. And वो दोनों अपने कान साफ करा रहे थे एम्बेसी की बात. I was like, what the fuck is happening here? ये क्या चल कर रहा है? अरे ये ट्राई करा के देख. उसके पास वो ऑरेंज कलर का एक लिक्विड था, उसने उसमें अपनी वो पूरी डाली इतनी लंबी सी पिन. एंड मतलब ये अनसाइंटिफिक बात है लेकिन ENT फेल है उसके सामने, ईयरबड फेल है जिस तरह. एंड इट्स all of these little artisanal dyeing professions
Yeah.
in Delhi that, and still So he posted on Twitter. He said the rate was 20 rupees. Even now, can you imagine? Like 10 years ago, it was 20 rupees. But there's all these, jaduwalas, jugglers,
Davakhanas. Do you ever see
दवाखाना
them? Um,
वो जो वो टेंट वाले वो
exactly.
अरे वो तो बहुत करप्ट होते हैं.
I know, but Hakims,
Yeah.
Dawawalas, all of those people.
I had Dr. Sheikh on, bro. What are you talking about?
Oh my God, I did see that episode. That was wow.
Are you gonna host him on your podcast?
I would love to.
Okay.
I would love to.
He goes against.
You are a different vibe. You guys, we are two ladies, right? So we have so many questions for him.
I want to see how he responds to them without getting embarrassed. That's gonna be the real. Fun
I think
part.
all of us have to think about that. Like me and Getty might just get a bit embarrassed.
हाँ तो I mean there's like with him man fuck. So he really shits on those dawakhanas that you're talking about, but I did always have a fascination कि इसमें क्या होता है.
Yeah, I just want to try it out.
क्योंकि okay, first of all, it's not really inviting, but it's also kind of like danger inviting. क्योंकि वो तंबू गड़ा होता है छोटा सा काला.
It's very hocus pocus looking.
It is very hocus pocus. के अंदर
Yeah.
जाओगे आप किसी के ऐसे वो nails
It
होंगे
looks
और
like a
वो
shaman is gonna, cast a spell on it.
100%.
Yeah.
And even in Faridabad, they would have it on both sides of the street
Yeah.
because you would find that ये लोग traveling वो हैं. But I could just never get myself to like stop.
We should go there once together
Yeah. And just open the
and check it out.
flap
Yeah.
and say कि मेरे जोड़ों में दर्द है.
हाँ.
And see what happens.
Malham दिखाओ.
So your Delhi houses has been featured a bunch of times, no? उससे पहले was a little side project. Now it's taken a life of its own.
It's taken in a life. It still remains to be my ode to my city and my dear diary moment. I'm glad people are appreciating it, though. I just hope a lot more people can send me photographs of houses that are going to go. There are some rules to abide by the way. If it's a road-facing house, you can take a photo, but otherwise, please take permission. But yeah. Sometimes I have these times where I can't write and I refuse to post a picture without a memory bank of it. So I'm sorry if I don't post often enough. Why am I apologizing for that?
That's
the way
okay.
Delhi houses is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, tell me something. I've always found you as a very tasteful person who's, for the lack of a better sentence, has been surrounded by art, has spoken about art, has lived in not necessarily the most rich places, but certainly the most beautiful places. You always have. I've been to 2 of your places. You've decorated them very tastefully. And everyone has a distinct journey when they go on to acquire taste. Some people inherit it as a consequence of being born into an aristocratic family where there is the arts and culture. आसपास ही होता है. कुछ लोग degrees करते हैं, so they acquire taste because they have an immersion in the arts for 4 years when they do like a degree at NIFT, whatever. Others have professions around it, right? And others yet, when they acquire purchasing power, they find other people with taste who teach them. Like, this is the way to have cocktails. This is what you can think about art, right? But I still find that बहुत सारे लोग, once they acquire money, they become very functional instead of tasteful. Like, their prerogative or their वो जिस चीज़ को search करते हैं दुनिया के अंदर, it is rarely beauty and taste and more practicality and functionality. And I've seen the way practicality and functionality compounds is it makes your inner life kind of banal. You know, like you don't have too many beautiful things to look at or be around or have them sort of decorate your life. But you've always done that. Anywhere from the things you do for work to the kind of houses you live in. अब वो हो सकता है maybe it's a duty for you, but if people were to start acquiring taste, how would they go about that?
I think the best place to acquire taste is first in tradition. I think I acquired my taste from my nani, my grandmother, who was a very simple Bihari lady who loved to wear a sari every day. And every time she plated me a plate or she traveled around and bought certain curios for a house, it was of a certain variety. She was a very delicate lady, she was a very strong lady. She knew how to shoot a gun, but at the same time, she was a very delicate lady. Like the way she cooked the food, the way she described at this point, when you smell this, then you must put this masala in it, right? So I love cooking, and I've learnt it from my grandmother and my mother alike. So my grandmother taught me, and she lived a fairly humble middle class life because her husband was a doctor. They travel around the world, yes, but he was a doctor from Jamshedpur, and then they were in Delhi. And my mother was married to a army officer. You know, they're like DU lovers that had gotten married, and I actually grew up on top of a barsati. But this is where both I think me and my mother will appreciate my grandma. We lived on a barsati. My parents loved to host. Coming from an army background, they always, had a old monk up their armpit, ready to offer it to anyone who would come and have a drink with them. Near Singhu border, they live very far away. But my mother built my drawing room out of bamboo and thatch. So we used to call it the jhopdi, and it had a amazing cooler in there, and it was a cool spot. And that time, I think, when your parents are in the army, there was cane furniture that was very popular, available on the side of a highway or in a big shop in Punjabi Bagh. You know what I mean? So we had cane furniture and the glass tabletop on top of a cane tabletop, that typical old, and moodas and all of that Dilli Haat kind of stuff, and a big cooler and a big fridge. And that's all you really need to live a posh life, back in the day. So my parents were that. But the way they had built this jhopadi, the way they had taken the little money they used to earn in army and put beauty to this fairly humble yet opulent spot, because like we have a drawing room. This is very opulent. It's a jhopadi, but we have a drawing room, right? I think it came from there. It came from seeing beauty in tradition. And from there, obviously, because of what I studied, my parents were pretty surprised when I told them that I wanted to study archaeology, and I wanted to study art history, and I wanted to study about culture. And they maybe even till this day worry about how this is a viable profession where I can pay the rent and buy food for my dog as well. You see, so but to develop taste is to look at beauty constantly, I think, and to understand the evolution of your own eyes in terms of appreciating things. I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry.
It does. It does.
I
I'm
go to
gonna shove it back to you with this statement. When you came to my studio last time, I had all these juvenile posters on. The contents had changed. They were cheap reprints of art that I could find online as a consequence of being at the India Art Fair and being friends with Sumit Roy and other people more exposed to the arts. It was more film-centric stuff, more depictions of Indian gods because I like Vedic astrology. My first posters used to be standard Pink Floyd, Jim Morrison. It's like a product of my times, more or less.
Man, my first poster was Triple H.
Yeah?
Yeah. I had a Triple H poster, man.
He's अब तो वो बन गया WWE का manager बन गया वो.
अच्छा, I don't even know that.
He's
stuff.
revivified
Wow, wow,
WWE.
wow.
Yeah.
So he's
Vince
Steve...
McMahon has stepped down.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
Vince. Yeah.
See, he married the boss's daughter, and he got it done.
Vince's daughter. He's married.
Stephanie McMahon. Yeah.
Oh, right. She was also a wrestler, right?
Yeah, they play multiple roles. Yeah. So, but the progression is such that ऐसे juvenile rock के posters, my taste at that time, उनके वो edges वगैरह भी मैंने काट रखे हैं खुद कैंची से ना, ताकि वो अच्छा लगे और मैं tape से चिपका पाऊँ. The tape is not even rounded at the back, so it looks neat. So ऊपर से लगा रखा है tape ताकि वो light से लगे तो चमकता है वो. To the posters that you saw, and then eventually I acquired some art. Some was gifted to me, and then I painted the walls black. And I can slowly see, I mean, this is just like visual art. Music taste के अंदर भी ऐसा होता है. Then the sort of things you eat and drink, right? But I found that it's been a very slow journey of coming across stuff and other people with influence, feeling intimidated, confused, but then, like Jordan Peterson says, stumbling into beauty nonetheless.
Yeah.
Because you don't, you don't do it from the womb, but there has to be a process. And I just want to
No,
make
I
sure
don't
ki,
think you need to look for an answer. I think it's a personal journey. Do you like beautiful things? If you like beautiful things, then you will invite them in your life, or you will, just keep them around you. So my first journey with art was right after my Triple H poster, when I went to study, and I had my first dorm room. I had my own private space that I wasn't sharing with my sister, and then she was trying to, her poet. Was when I went to university and they're throwing away art catalogs, and I remember looking through them. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. I'm going to put it up in my room. And then once I'd collected a lot of these torn out pages from art catalogs, I went to my room and I was like, how am I going to do it? And I had no structure or beauty or curational direction in my mind to put it. So I just slammed it all over my wall with thumb pins, right? But then when I like stepped back and I looked at it, I loved it. And everyone who came to me, and that time I really got into Chinese contemporary art, because the auction house catalogs that they were throwing out were like Christie's, Sotheby's, Philippe's, and all of that, and there were these Chinese and Asian art auctions. So I got really into it. And I remember I had it, and everyone who came to my room kept asking me, they're like, what artist is this? And I used to keep looking up the caption on it. So I think it does not, oh, I want to be into art, can you tell me how to be into art? If you want to be into art, you will not stop yourself from looking at art. And when you will keep looking at it in your own personal way, you will form your own personal preferences. And then when you will want to go and acquire art, you will go and tell a person who is like an art advisor or a gallerist that I like stuff like this, can you show me that? It's, yeah, and that's how it should naturally happen. But a lot of people can't wait for that time and simply do not. If you're a doctor, if you're a surgeon and you are constantly on ER duty, you simply do not have the time to appreciate and spend time with beauty, right? Because you're always rushing. And that's when you need to have some sort of private, intimate moments with people who can advise you to what to look at,
and what
where
about
to find
imposter
beauty.
syndrome? Like when you first look at a piece of art, ऐसा हो जाता है लोग
Of
डर
your
जाते हैं.
art?
No, no, not of your own art. Like just the process. I'm not talking about मैं painting खरीदने की बात नहीं कर रहा. मैं just बोल रहा हूँ, going from an unexamined, unorganized life where you do your things. I mean, you could be successful or unsuccessful, but your walls are barren. You don't necessarily consider कि यार इस टेबल में मैं साइड पीस रखूंगा कि क्या वैल्यू है. आप सोचते हो कि ओ रूमी तो है, सोना ही तो है. Like that. Like you're very functional with
नहीं,
that.
अगर तुम वैसे मतलब से कर रहे हो that अरे I just need some art, just put it, then you buy posters, frame it, make it look good, put a nice lighting,
How
and
has
just
it changed your life that you keep investing in it, that you keep surrounding your life with it?
For me, it is a very passionate and a very romantic process, you see. And obviously, because I spend so much time looking at it, I understand the market of it. So why not put a little bit of a intelligent layer on top of it, right? Let's see where this goes. Let's see. Now I'm at the phase where I'm like, let me test my eye. If I like it from the get-go when I see it, do I want to trust my instincts and get one, and then the market will pick up? And it's become very fun to see that as well, because there have been some artists that I've like immediately seen and I was like, all right, guys, I love this. And I've like told some of my girlfriends as well, who also love art. It's like, okay, there is this one artist and this artist has 3 pieces. We are 3 friends. Should we get it? And I feel like I've done it multiple times where there's an artist and there's a series, and I think it's a fantastic series, and I've started really trusting my gut on it. And often it's happened that I've told people that, trust me, this is going to be a big artist 2 years from now. Not even 5, 10, 11. 2 years from now, this guy is going to be a big artist. And it's exactly happened.
Yeah.
And those people who I told in the first get-go, get this now, they've been coming to me. They're like, oh, I want this artist. It's like, too expensive now.
That's great. I invested some money in a Basquiat. Do you think I'll get it back?
Don't lie to me.
I'm
You
not
did?
kidding. I
How?
did.
In what? An NFT?
Guys, अब मेरे को बताना पड़ेगा कि टेक्नोलॉजी कैसे बदल देती है सब कुछ. नहीं, so I bought about 50 shares of a Basquiat painting.
Oh, what?
Yes.
That is a thing now?
Yeah. On Masterworks.
You buy shares on paintings?
and they hold it in a lot, they keep it. 1.5-2 साल में 3 साल में वो पेंटिंग बिक जाती है. 17-26% return, 13% return. It's all. So I actually spent a lot of time figuring out what I wanted to get because I wanted to invest in art. And I asked Sujat, who I think has a lot of art of his own. And मैंने कहा
Oh, yeah.
इस पे कर लूँ मैं. He's like, Basquiat, 100% do it.
100% don't think about it.
Yeah, so that happened 6 months ago. I'm gonna wait. Do you think like it's gonna
Just
sell?
sit back. आराम
Yeah.
से म्यूचुअल फंड समझो. कुछ साल बैठो उसके ऊपर.
Yeah. But do you prefer investing in art of like living artists or dead artists? Like what is?
I prefer living artists. I prefer I have a lot of fascination for modernists and much older artists, but contemporary art is where I'm very interested currently. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope this Basquiat sells because it's gonna make me a lot of money if that happens.
Yeah, it will. It will.
So ऐसे तो बहुत मैं I'll show you the website, bro. I think I like IF के time पे we were all fucking like working really hard, so we didn't see it. But I actually told Uma about it as well. And then once I invested, I was like, okay, great. It's just done. I just have to sit back, right? जब भी बिक जाएगी.
आराम से.
And this market is pretty liquid, no? Otherwise, like.
Basquiat is always liquid, baby.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. Feels good.
Yeah.
ठीक है. That is the end of all the things I had to ask you conversationally. Obviously, it's always a blast to hang out with you because you can expertly and funnily speak about many different things. And like I always say, where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Nowhere.
You said the
Well, you
exact
can
same
find
thing
me
last
in
time.
Delhi, walking about some streets early morning, sometimes with my dog, taking photos of houses by the side of the road. Yeah.
For the actual answer of this question, Anika Man on Instagram.
Yeah. Anika Man on Instagram. Yeah.
ठीक है.
You can find me there.
Dude, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for calling me. And what a wonderful studio you have.
Are you just recreating the last conversation?
What a wonderful studio you have.
नहीं, but
I love
मजे आया
it.
for real. Thanks for giving all this value to our listeners and watchers.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it.
क्या हो गया?
I'm tired, guys. I just had a long work day.
Yeah, no, honestly, yaar, I loved the segment about beauty. Maybe next time in 6 months or so, we can talk more about nesting in a house
Oh, yes. Nesting in a house. Yes.
because I think I enjoy that.
Maybe I can invite you to my home and maybe show you some of my art.
Sounds good.
At cafe.
ऐसे नहीं वो कौन सा होता है? What is that show जो ब्रूट करता है जहाँ पे लोगों के घरों के अंदर जाते हैं? Okay, they do a show. Anyway, this was Anika Man, art advisor, archaeologist, founder of Delhi Houses,
Yes.
several other projects. And this is Those Cars. See you all in the next episode. Bye bye. Take care. Sayonara.
Bye.